Okay, we are straight up, well, 10:45 Pacific time and the 45 wherever you are. We want to welcome everyone to our session today, Youth Voice, letting students lead the way. I think that there's some great information in store for you. And I would like to kind of plug the fact that on day 3 of this conference, we have an entire strand dedicated to Youth Voice. And so we're really excited about that this year. So I want to introduce you to the team. Actually, I'm going to introduce you to Stephanie Martinez, who's with the University of South Florida. And she's a friend and a colleague and just an incredible advocate for Youth Voice. And so she's going to lead the session and introduce her colleagues today.
Thanks, Patty. I'm Stephanie Martinez. I am, as Patty said, work at the University of South Florida on the PBIS project. And I want to introduce real quickly my 2 partners in crime today, not only for this session, but just in general, great relationships, great working with both Betsy Lazega, who works at the PBIS project with us. If you want to say hi, Betsy.
Hi, everyone. It's great to be with you today. We're excited to present to you.
And then Sherry. I've known Sherry for a long time now, and she has started partnering with us actually back in 2019 when we got our first opportunity to work with youth and getting their voice on PBIS. And then as a result of that work, Sherry had a great idea for this school year, which we're going to be talking about today. So Sherry, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, it's great to have you all in our audience today. Thank you for joining and hope you will learn some new things about how to involve students in your work.
So I just want to remind everyone of the virtual forum expectations that Brian shared this morning. I think he did a great job of covering those. Responsible, respectful, and safe, and how that relates to our time together on this leadership forum. I would assume, since you're with us, that you were able to locate your My Agenda tab, and all of the sessions that you have signed up for should be listed in that under that tab, My Agenda. Navigating the session page, again, you're here with us. The details are listed. Obviously, you clicked join session because you're here. And then to interact with us using the chat, we won't be using any polls today, but under the file tab, you'll find the materials that are going to be shared. A little guidance on how to use the chat. And like I said, we're not going to do any polls today. So if any information that you want to share or any questions you have can post in the chat. And we will save time at the end of the session to answer any questions that you post. And be careful now accidentally navigating away. So if you click the wrong part of the screen here, you might get booted out, but you can re-enter just the same way you got in with us just now. And if you need help, the little tab up there that says Help Desk, that's where you can click to ask questions and get support, technology support if you need it. And, most important, and we heard from our leaders this morning that, this work is not anything any one of us can do alone. So, as you listen to what's being shared today and tomorrow and Thursday, consider 5 questions, right? How does this compare to our priorities and specific to our session, student voice? Who would do this work? Where would this work live? So whose responsibility is it? What should we stop doing to make room for this work? And that's George Sugai's, it's been his pitch for a long, long time. And how will we assess whether it's implemented well and if it's working? And of course, we rely on data for that. So I think with that, I'll turn it over to Stephanie.
Thanks, Patty. We just have 2 big things that we're going to be talking about today. Why student voice, setting the context of why you should include students in your PBIS system, or just decision-making, data chats, but including their input about your school policies, procedures, programs, curriculums, whatever it is that you're looking towards. But the reason you're really here today is to learn about how to actually do this. Like, how can we actually get this done? So that's why we've got Sherry here today and Betsy, because we're having an opportunity this year to expand student voice in Osceola County. So we're going to give you the nitty gritty of what we're doing in Osceola County with students to get their voice. And pretty cool, Sherry's going to be able to give us a really cool update today about something that's happened very recently. And we'll conclude with questions at the end. So recently, a colleague of ours found this quote, and I thought this was just amazing. You know, here's this young man saying, you know, everybody's having meetings. We've got the central office meeting, we got principals meeting, we got teachers meeting, we have counselors meeting, everybody's meeting. So to talk about how to teach us or how to make education better, but how comes no one's meeting with us? Where are we at the table? And really, that's why we're doing the student voice. That is our rationale for doing it. We need to bring the students to the table. It's their education, their career, and they definitely have opinions and thoughts about how to improve education for them. So just a little background things about why we're doing it again and who. So this is what we're actually doing. We are working with students in this case, but stakeholders are just not just teachers, not just educators, not just students, but also family and community members. So the reason we're doing it is, one, and most important, is we want the students to feel relevance in education and feel like they are being heard and their thoughts and opinions are being taken into consideration when there are new policies and procedures and curriculums and programs being put in place. So they feel that there's some ownership. And if we know with students in high school specifically want to have that ownership. It's also a great practice for cultural relevancy for the students as well. And also sometimes our students have really good ideas because they just have a different perspective of things that we don't see, and they can bring those new ideas to the table. And as a result, it helps to build some of those positive relationships. One of the things that we learned with meeting with our high school students about positive relationships is we had two students who were brought to our student groups who weren't necessarily connected to the school, but at the end of the first session, we saw both of the students, two different schools, becoming leaders in their group. One in particular is a student who struggles a little bit with connections with school, and the adult that was with her was really excited to see her take on that leadership role and starting to make connections with others at the school. The other thing we saw, which was really cool at the end of one of the sessions, was the students didn't really know each other. That was purposely done. And at the end, they built a group chat and they were exchanging phone numbers, and they were going to do a group chat at the end. So here students are connecting with new students they would not have met otherwise. The other thing is when we look at what is cultural responsiveness, and if you look at the core features of that within PBIS, it's voice. And so this is that opportunity to get that voice from our students, and especially at high school level. When we think about students in high school, there's so many different factors that influence them. And one of the keys here is we want to have a positive school climate and culture. And one of the ways to do that is look at the developmental level and age of our students who are at this point wanting to be leaders. They want to have some sort of control of their education. And this is giving them that leadership and opportunity to have that developmentally appropriate for them. So there's lots of different ways. There's not one way to get student voice. We're going to give you an example today of one way that we've done that. But here are some just different examples of things that we've seen take place. So for example, the second one highlighted where it says QR code, we had students in a student leadership course come up with different questions. They took a map of the school. They found the locations that had high traffic patterns on campus. They posted QR codes, and those were different questions. The students would click on the QR code with their phone. They would answer the question. The question would be dropped into a Google form. And then weekly or bi-weekly, those responses were shared, gathered by the leadership team and then shared back to the school administration. The reason they did that was the school student leadership team said, you know, there's only a few of us in this course doing this, and you're going to hear our opinions, but we want you to hear from opinions from others. So it was really cool to hear that as well. So lots of different examples. There's one of the ones that's an easy way to get lots of input and feedback from multiple students on campus. Here's just some other examples as well. So what are some of the benefits? Well, there's benefits not only for the school, but we also want to think about what are the benefits for the student. So the benefits really for the student is for them to see how activism can lead to change and how their voice can be used and how their input can directly impact practices and policies on their campus. It also makes that connection with them to the school and feeling that they're being valued and they're getting that engagement and participation in there. And they get to see that there's some change that, yes, you know, by speaking up, by having that participation, I do really have an impact, which could hopefully then lead future for them. So it's not just school, but anything they're involved with in the future. Now, those are some benefits for our students. Benefits for our school is that, as I said earlier, we get a different perspective of our school from our students. So the first time we did the focus groups of students in Osceola County, we showed the students their discipline data by locations and settings. And one of the areas was the hallway. And when we were talking to the students about the hallway, they said it's not hallways. They had identified two specific locations. One was a stairwell where students were stopping in the middle of the stairwell and not going up and down the stairs. So it was difficult to pass by. And then the second one was by a specific soda machine. And that students would gather in front of it. So those who were trying to buy something machine couldn't purchase it. And so their suggestion was, we just need an adult at the stairwell and at that machine, and that will break up some of the issues. And guess what? It did. So it's just kind of cool that they then took the student suggestions and made it work. Our students are creative and they come up with some great ideas and strategies and solutions, but also by getting their input, we as a school could say, we've heard from your peers and this is what they're saying and this is why we're making those changes. So if you have a representative group of students, then they feel like their voice is represented on campus as well. So with that, this is the why we're going to do this, the benefits, the value of it. And now we're going to get a little bit into more about what this actually looks like in implementation. And I know that's really why you're here today. So I'm going to turn it over to Betsy to talk about.
Thank you, Stephanie. So what we're going to be sharing is an ongoing project that we've been working on with Osceola County Schools. So you're going to also hear from Sherry Waretka, who is the amazing district coordinator of PBIS for that district. They are a large district. If you're thinking in terms of geography, they are really close to Disney World, Orlando area. And this project began a few years ago. We held day-long student voice sessions with 2 high schools in Osceola, and they went over really well. They were very successful. This year, we expanded that work to 6 local high schools, where we are working with cohorts of high school students throughout the year. And the hope is that we create some meaningful student-led enhancements to the school's PBIS frameworks. So we're going to go ahead to the next slide. And so what does it take to make some meaningful enhancements? And I really enjoyed listening to the opening presentations and one of the presenters who talked about, investing in the long game as opposed to trying to sort of find the easy route or the shortcut. I do think that with processes like enhancing student voice, there needs to be a commitment to that long game. So the planning for this project began with acquiring that district level support for the idea of really investing the time and the resources into enhancing student voice. So luckily for us in Florida, Osceola has one of the most driven PBIS coordinators that you'll ever meet. That's Sherry Waretka. And that in combination with a superintendent that is really committed to PBIS and advocates for it in all of the schools. So that made for a really solid investment in this project. And from there, we needed to recruit principals who were not only interested in the idea of student voice, but were really willing to commit the time to this project. Each school then identified what we call a PBIS point of contact, or a coach, a teacher to help, or a coach to help guide the students through the sessions and help to advocate for the ideas that the students plan to share. So we are having 4 half-day sessions with the students. We've already had the first one. We're going to share details of that with you. And we created plans for how the students are going to be spending those days with us. So we are currently in the implementation phase. The first session went really well. So we're really excited to continue and go back for the remainder. And next. Here are some of the expectations that we had. We started with a virtual meeting with the group of principals that had expressed interest in participating. We wanted to make sure that they really had an understanding of what all of this would mean in terms of responsibility for them and their schools. So what we wanted was the same students to attend all 4 sessions. We wanted to have that point of contact or team leader with them at those sessions. We wanted to make sure that the principal was going to be okay with making time to meet with those participating students, to hear what the students had to say, the feedback that they gave, and show them the products that they created. We also wanted the students to present their ideas to the PBIS team on campus. And that PBIS team and principal meeting could be simultaneous, or it could be 2 separate meetings, depending on the schedules of the people involved. We wanted the administrators and the students to work together to help make those ideas a reality, and come up with all of the logistics of how these ideas would then be shared with students and staff across the school. Next. So once we met with the principals and identified who that point of contact, team leader, adult would be, we wanted to meet with those folks, those points of contacts, to describe in detail what their roles would be. We wanted to make sure that they had everything that they needed to be advocates for the students and to know what was expected. So prior to the sessions, we asked that they help to figure out who should be selected in terms of the student population, and to help with the logistics of the field trips. So we had 3 high schools in each cohort. So there was 10 students per high school. So there were 30 students in each cohort. And so 2 of the schools would have to travel to one of the local high schools. So we did need to have bus transportation, and the point of contacts helped with the logistics of getting their students to the events. During the actual day, the half-day sessions, the point of contacts served as note takers. They were told that their primary role really was to listen. They were also there to help make sure that the students stayed on track, and to also make sure that no student kind of usurped all of or dominated all of the time. We wanted to make sure that all of the students that were there had a role in developing the project. They were there, they were chosen for a very specific reason, and they all had something different to bring to the table. They also wanted to make sure that they, asked questions if the students needed some help in developing ideas, that they helped them by asking those probing questions to get them where they needed to be. And then after each session, that point of contact was asked to coordinate with the principal and their PBIS team to make sure that they were that kind of squeaky wheel that would help to set up those meetings and make sure those action plans actually got rolling. And of course, they were the contact or the liaison with Sherry if there were any barriers to accomplishing the tasks. This is just a little, and hopefully you guys can see it. This was the template that we used, that we provided to those point of contacts to identify the students for our focus groups. It was really extremely important to us that the students in the groups represented the racial and ethnic diversity of the school campus. It's very easy when we put together focus groups for schools to identify students that are already kind of go-getters or in their student government. But the point of this activity was to pick students that had a diverse composition in terms of academic and behavioral backgrounds, include students with IEPs, or that are part of their exceptional student education program, and students that have received disciplinary referrals. We also tried to identify students in the 10th and 11th grade, so that these would be the students that would have the opportunity to really know the school, having been there for a while. And also they still had some investment in seeing the improvements that they were envisioning. And so here is a breakdown of how the sessions are structured. We include an opening circle to begin the sessions. We're trying to build relationships, not only between us and the students, but also the students and each other. So we clustered the school so that the high school each worked with their own group of students from the same school. But we also wanted to make sure that we offered opportunities throughout the day for them to share and collaborate with other schools. And I do think that they got a lot out of not only meeting other students from their schools, but listening to some of the issues and problems and barriers that others shared, and also looking at any of the differences or similarities that they had within their disciplinary practices. And at the end of the day, the students presented their plan to the entire group. Our sessions were a half day so that we could make sure that they got back to their home schools in time for dismissal.
I just have to share a really funny story too about this first opening circle. So when Betsy and Sherry and I were trying to figure out how we could get the kids to intermingle and get to know one another, we had an activity. So we came up with the idea of making matching icons for all the different superheroes. So like Iron Man, Spider-Man, Superman, all those. Betsy put that together. And so there'd be 2 from each one, and then they'd have to find a partner and match them up. So this is where it gets really funny. So Betsy had turned them into stickers so they could peel them and whatever. These kids were so, I don't want to say kids, these youth were so excited about these stickers. They're like, Miss, are these stickers? Yeah. I mean, and they were wearing the stickers on their shirt. They were putting it on they just were so enthralled about getting these stickers to partner up. And they're like, do we have to return them or can we keep them? And we're like, you can keep them. They were just so excited about these stickers. So I just had to share that. It was the funniest moment, and it was a great way to get that conversation going.
Yeah, I mean, Sherry and I have this conversation all the time. Everybody loves stickers. No one's too old for stickers. So you're thinking in terms of treasure boxes, high school students still like them. Thank you for adding that, Stephanie. And what you're seeing here is just a detailed account of what the topics will be at each session. So our very first session was about how to increase school spirit. So looking at an overview of PBIS, and then looking currently at what their climate looks like at their schools, letting them see their climate data for their particular schools, and then working together to come up with ideas of how we could do that. We're going to work a little bit more deeply in our next sessions now that we've established some rapport, and the students may feel a little bit safer talking about some of these concepts. In session 2, we'll be focusing on student mental health and looking at some of their school-wide data in regards to that. Session 3 is going to be about equity within their disciplinary practices. And we already had some schools that were starting to go there in the first session and talking about equity issues. So it'll be interesting to see what that conversation is like during session 3. And lastly, in session 4, we're going to be talking about any changes that they notice in their climate data at the end of our year together. And now Sherry's going to walk us through the more detailed agenda of that first session.
Thanks, Betsy. So before we wanted to get everybody together, we wanted to make sure that the adults knew their role. And as Betsy said, and Stephanie said as well, we did have one adult from every school that was our point person, the chaperone, rode the bus with them and all that good stuff. But we wanted to make sure they understood what they were supposed to do. And I would say for the most part, they did a great job. They definitely had to kind of rein them in, get them back on track, maybe ask some probing questions, those kind of things. So this is just kind of a detailed, basically a cheat sheet for them so that they knew what they should do. And like we said, the day went by super fast. So we really needed to make sure we were very much on focus and on point as far as what the students were doing. You can see some pictures of the picture to the left is our group A that we had our first cohort, and then the other one was our second cohort. So we had to adjust to different circumstances. Sometimes we had to move throughout the day, but space in our schools and our district is very limited. So we were flexible. Okay, thanks, Stephanie. These are just some pictures of the students actually looking at their climate data. It was very eye-opening. We gave them copies just to look at, and it was not, none of them had any names on it. It was just for their school, so it was general data. And in both groups, and even at several of the schools, we heard students say, "You guys look at this? You use this data? Oh my gosh, I didn't even know you did anything with this." And I've shared that a lot with my schools whenever I talk to leaders and district people, and I say, you know how we always preach one of the most frustrating things when you take a survey is to not know what happened to it. We need to think about our students. Our students are taking these surveys, but then they don't know what happens to it. So it might be good whenever you're talking to your students about things, whether it be a concern, hey, we're going to work on improving this system in our school because based on the survey that you all took last month, this is what you said. Just to reference it, not that you have to be, dig down deep into the data, but I think the students were very surprised. They just had no idea. And honestly, I think that they were more self-reflective, like maybe I shouldn't just take it lightly and I should actually think about whenever I take it next time, be a little bit more concerned. So what we did is we asked them, like, what are some things that you noticed about the data? What are some things that maybe were concerning to you or just like aha things about your school? And that's what they were to look at when they looked at the data. You can do the next one, Stephanie, please. So then this is just an example. So here's an example of one of the surveys from the schools. And then what we had the students do is they were just to list some of their primary concerns. So one of our schools, this is the students, they wrote it all down. We tried to, there again, the adult was just there to observe. We really wanted the students to take the lead. So the students wrote down some of their top concerns. And you can see like social, emotional self-control, teacher-student relationships, school safety, student behaviors, tardy, skipping, fighting. This is coming from the students, which for me, working at the district level, and I hear what is talked about from the adults at the school, it's like it's the same thing. And I think that's a great thing to share with the schools, that the students have the same concerns that we have as adults. So we need to work together. And the communication between staff and students. And then we gave the students dots. They all got a couple dots, and they had to then take those dots and put them next to the ones that they thought were a priority. So they got 2 dots and they just put them by, these are my top 2. And so then you can see those results. And then that's what we then kind of moved as, this is a priority. This is what we're going to really focus on.
I do have to say one really cool thing about this is after the kids voted, we had them posted on the wall. And it was really interesting with the second group. We didn't give them directions to do it, but they kind of did like a virtual walk around the room because they wanted to see what their peers were saying from the other school. So it was just really interesting. We didn't give them the directions. They just started doing it on their own, and they wanted to see what the other schools were saying. So we, took the time from our agenda and let them do that. And I think it was pretty cool for them to see similarities, but also differences as well.
Thanks for sharing that. So then, similar to what Stephanie just said, we saw, in the 2 different groups, the same general topics that just kept surfacing. So students are very concerned about building relationships. Students were one of their concern was just like their social emotional well-being. Really being heard and feeling like they're being heard. So it was one of those aha things to really see how they were very similar. I mean, yes, there were some differences too. Some of the top things were engaging instruction, like I said, relationships. There were several schools that mentioned things about accessibility to their counselor. And I know it's hard, and I can't speak for your schools, but I know at our schools, our counselors at the high school level usually don't have a lot of time to just meet with kids. They're really tied up in other things. And it's definitely all good work, but it's just a little bit more challenging. So it was interesting because I've already made a connection with our district coordinator for all of our school counselors, and we're going to work together to try to help see if we can maybe communicate better to the students about how they can reach those counselors, because sometimes they just don't know. So what we did is they took those concerns, and then that's really what they were going to focus on for the duration of this year, is based on what they thought were their main concerns. That was how we were going to move them into the next part, which we'll share next. And this is an idea that Betsy and Stephanie brought to the table. And it's a process, and it allowed a big visual for the students to create. And so it's called a path. And it really focuses on the end, and you can see in that bottom one, it's a little bit easier to see, and I apologize that they're small. But you can see their end goal, like what do they want to accomplish by the end of this year? So in May 2022, when it's at the end of school, we hope to accomplish this. And then they also put some of their visions, some of their dreams, and then they were asked to then go back and say, okay, what's our first step? What's the next step? And they really broke it down by, what are some things that we have to accomplish? Who are some people that we need to talk to? What are some of the barriers we might have? How are we going to overcome those? So it was a more of a visual picture of what their plan is for the year. And then they took these back. And the cool thing was, like Stephanie said earlier, I just spoke with one of our high school principals yesterday, and he had just met with the student group. They had some scheduling conflicts, so they couldn't meet earlier, but they finally met. And he said, oh, it was really awesome. They showed me this graphic organizer that they made. And I said, oh, could you send it to me? And so he sent it to me, and it was the path. It was the visual. So they actually took this big piece of paper, brought into his office, and talked about it. So the fact that it was meaningful, and they had some really good discussions, kind of next steps moving forward, what is going to happen. But I thought it was encouraging that the students felt value to what they created, and then they wanted to share that with their principal. Next, please. And then after that, we then gave them an action plan. And so the action plan was intended to really break it down and figure out, what are we going to do next? Because sometimes with students, it happens to us adults as well, we get this big picture and we see this grandiose plan, but we're not totally sure how to actually make it happen. So this is intended to break it down into chunks so that we can see what are some specific things we need to do, who are people we need to talk to, what are some things that we might need to have happen. Obviously we have our goal, but there may be some things that we really need some help with. So it was exciting to see this happen and see the students really come together and really lead that change and really take those initiatives. Go ahead, Betsy.
Okay, so here are some of the samples or some of the things that schools identified with the dreams that they came up with on their paths and some of the goals. These were two that we thought were really cool. One of the schools had a goal that they would like 3 out of their 7 of their teachers to ask them how their day was going or how they were doing each day. There was this kind of theme within that school of just feeling like there wasn't a lot of caring and kindness. Some teachers, but not feeling that connection with all teachers. So some of the action steps that they decided to take were to talk to students about, ask them survey questions about, when was the last time teachers discussed with you that they cared about you or asked you how you were doing. They also wanted to survey staff and sample teachers face to face who they felt may not be as warm. So just, these are students, this is their perception. We need to listen and figure out how to best honor what they're telling us. When we had schools also like school number 2 that dug more deeply into what they saw as inequities in their academic and disciplinary practices. So their dream was that they would like to see academic lessons that were more representative of all students. And their goal was that they really wanted to have at least one lesson every 2 weeks within their English language arts or social studies that was representative of students of color or reflected students of color. Some of their action steps were they wanted to start with meeting with the principal to have a discussion about what they found, and also meeting with the department chairs for those 2 departments, and identifying the materials that teachers would need to be able to facilitate these kinds of lessons. So those were some of the things that we saw. Next. And so what you're going to see next is a little video where the students are actually presenting their paths. It's short, but it just gives you a sense of how articulate they were and how engaged they were in the process. Uh-oh.
So our goal is basically we want to have our school more engaged with each other. So by doing that,
Stephanie, your screen isn't showing the. There you go. Awesome.
So our goal is basically we want to have our school more engaged with each other. So by doing that, we're gonna better advertising our school events, clubs, and our sports, just everything that our school does better, so that our students can actually get involved with the school. Because that's the main problem that's with our school, is that our students and teachers aren't really connected with each other. They kind of just go to school because they have to.
The steps we have in mind is club approval. We already have one club in mind for us, either us as examples or to get more students from student government or other places. So just basically go around school and start conversations to make people feel more comfortable in our schools, to be a proud dog. To admin, create teacher mentorship. Basically, we're teachers that we think, all the students think are the best examples as teachers. To have other teachers go in their classrooms so they can do better, so we can all have better learning experience. And for token economy, basically, I don't know how to explain it perfectly, but a token economy is basically where we have a set system of awards of things that students do, so that whatever they have, they get awarded for, or discounts for games.
Quality across campus is have a monthly PowerPoint sent to all the teachers that will have a YouTube video linked into it, and it will have all the guidance counselors' names, and let students know that they can go down there whenever they want, instead of having this schedule where you have to set an appointment.
So I know that was just a short sampling, but we had all 6 schools presented their paths to the entire group, which was a good opportunity for them to practice. And it also let us all hear what they were thinking about and created a lot of discussion among the schools about things that they each had. We had a lot of schools that had some discrepancies in their dress code policies that I don't think any of them knew before then. So that created a little bit of conversation as well. But overall, it was just really great to hear them talk about what they had come up with. And at the end of the day, if you can go to the next slide, what we had them do was write down one word that expressed how they were feeling as they wrapped up day one. And we just felt so good at the end of this day to hear some of the words that they shared. Larger words are the ones that were more frequently shared. So things like excited, hopeful, confident, motivated. And as the parent of a high schooler, I would be thrilled to hear that my child felt any of these words at the end of any school day. So to give them that feeling was very inspiring and motivating for us in terms of the work. And I'm really excited to see where we go with it next.
So at the end of the event, I wanted to make sure I followed up with principal. So I sent out an email. I didn't want to give them too much information about what happened because I really wanted that to come from the students. I did just recently, about 2 weeks ago, follow up with another email to the principals to say, hey, how did your meeting go with your students? So kind of like hint, did you meet with them? So I think that kind of was a little nudge for them to have a conversation with the adult to make sure that they actually did connect with the students, because now just in the past week, I've heard several schools that have it on their schedule. Some of them are meeting, they just met, or they are meeting today, the end of this week. So I'm excited about that. Next, please. And then I also wanted to follow up with our district level people. So my superintendent, our deputy superintendent, who's my boss, the assistant superintendents, just so they knew what happened that day. And they're a little bit more involved in the process. So I was a little bit more specific about actually what happened. I did get a follow-up email from our superintendent, just saying how excited she was that this happened and the exciting changes she's hoping to see. So that was definitely encouraging. Another thing that came out is I sent it to also at our high school level, we have an assistant superintendent for high school, and then we have a director. So the director actually started talking about it at her, they have a meeting with all the directors and our coordinators. And so it sparked some interest in our middle school. So not to steal Betsy and Stephanie's thunder, but we're actually going to expand that hopefully and maybe involve some middle schools next year. So, the power of peer persuasion is really good. And I always like to have that positive vibes being shared. So that was really awesome. Next, please. And then this was just a funny saying that a student actually said at the end. They were commenting on, they were like, oh my gosh, my phone's been blowing up. Look at all these text messages I've missed. And the adult was like, that's what happens when you're actually engaged and you're not on your phone all day. So it was just really funny. We were all laughing about that, but it's true. I know our students really want to be engaged. They want to be involved. And I think sometimes we as adults need to take a little bit of ownership in that and really listen to them and just allow them to have that voice. So the next part is questions, which I think we have some questions.
Patty has put one question in the chat box, and she also texted me one too. Do you have a guide for working on implementing this in our school district? And I wouldn't say we have a guide. This is just something that we have expanded from our first focus groups. At the end, you will have our contact information if you want some more information about that. but just how we did it, how we decided upon it. The second, and I'll let Sherry talk a little bit more about this, but the steps we took to pick the students. So we had a worksheet, which we thought would probably be the easiest way to help guide that adult on each campus, to remind them that we wanted a representative campus. So we wanted students, as Betsy said earlier, 10th and 11th grade, because we want them to see that change. And since we met with them back in September, we knew 9th graders wouldn't know the campus as well. So, and then 12th graders will be leaving. So we really wanted to focus on 10th and 11th grade, and we gave them criteria. So we wanted students by race and ethnicity, by gender, identity, orientation, students with and without disabilities, students who maybe sometimes do get in trouble a little bit, in addition to some of those students that are seen as leadership roles. And I know Sherry takes it really serious with that list, and she gets them from the schools first, and she does a little preview of them.
Yeah.
So Sherry, do you want to talk about what you do when you get that list from the schools?
Yes. So I usually look up some of the students just to see like what do I notice about them? Have they gotten any referrals? What's their GPA? There was one school that sent me a group of students, and all of them had 3.5 GPAs or higher. And I just merely said, you know, this isn't exactly what we're looking for in our student focus group. I mean, I'll just be honest with you. I mean, we don't have any of our high schools that have all their kids making A's. So just to be vulnerable. So I said, you know, if this is what your focus is, because they wanted their student government group to be involved. And I was like, that's not really the focus that we have. That's not our vision. So basically when I put it to them that way, they went back and changed the list and added some other students. And usually what I would tell my adults is I said, when you get on the bus and all the students are together, if none of them know each other, you chose well. If you get on the bus and a lot of students know each other, you probably could have done a little better job of choosing students. So, you know, some of our schools were better than others. And we saw that even in the work that was accomplished. It was definitely very apparent. So we just try to, you know, hope for the best, I guess.
Carrie, there's another question that along the same lines, and I think you just shared that you were about to embark on this work with middle schools. One of the questions in the chat says, can this be exclusively with high school? And I know, Stephanie, you've had some experience working with middle school students, as have I. My 2 cents is you just have to structure it a little more tight, a little tighter. But Stephanie, how about your experience with middle school students?
I was just going to say the same thing, Patty. You just have to have it a little bit more structured with them, and probably the adults with those need a little bit more direct instruction of what they need to be do during the day with the students as well. But we're like Sherry said, hopefully we're going to expand to middle schools in Osceola County next year. So that's something we're looking forward to, hopefully.
I've already had 3 principals that have volunteered, so.
Wow, that's excellent.
So kind of to continue that topic though, if I could, Lori is asking, she's at a K-8 school, could this work for students 4th to 8th grade? And again, the younger, the more structure, but it's absolutely critical to to allow the voices of all students. But again, Stephanie, I yield back to you. Betsy?
You know, I haven't done this with elementary schools, but I've heard of elementary schools doing it, but really focusing in on 1 or 2 little things that they want the kids to do, and probably questions a little bit different. Like we really had them, and I'll talk a little bit about how we had them dig into the climate data, but I know of one elementary school where they really did it more of true focus groups, and they didn't keep them all day. They limited to like 90 minutes, and they did it during lunch, and they had food. But they asked the students what did they like about their school, what they didn't like about their school, and what changes they would make to the school. And they said it was a very successful process doing that way. And then they brought the kids back for lunch 4 or 5 times throughout the year to continue those conversations in that elementary school.
There's also a few people who've asked about the list that was generated on the posters with the dots. Who determined those topics, the students or the adults?
Betsy, you want to answer that one?
Sure. Well, the students, using the data that we shared with them, they prioritized the most important to them in terms of topics that were on that survey. And once all of those were brainstormed on there, the students then went back and put a dot next to the ones that were most important to them. So each student got 2 dots, and they were able to, from the list that your group generated, which 2 do you think are most important?
And to piggyback a little bit on what Betsy shared, the students had never seen the data before. It was something new to them. Some of them remember taking the survey, some did not. And so we actually had them pair up with either 1 partner or 2 partners, and we gave them a graphic organizer to work on. So first thing we did was we gave them the data and just let them look at it for like 10-15 minutes to see what they found. And then we had that graphic organizer for them to work on. And then at the bottom of it, it was what are those areas of need? And then those groups came, like after about 15 minutes or so, they came back together as one school and took what was on that graphic organizer to make that master list. And then as Betsy said, they got the dots and they got to vote on it. Again, they love the dots.
And Catherine is asking the sample climate survey that you used, or what kind was it? What version?
It's the district one. They have a district adopted climate survey that all the schools take. And it's broken down to students, families, and teachers. And we just showed them the student results.
And so
it's a
most
district
districts or
adopted one.
states have climate survey, and it's that's public access anyway. And so accessing those data that already exist is, more time efficient.
And if you don't have one, I believe PBIS apps does have a climate survey that people can access if they need one. And then I know there's one from Georgia that Georgia has shared if you do not have currently a climate survey that you'd like to look and explore.
And there were a few people who have asked about how do you maintain the safety for the students? And the question was specific to opposing gangs, I suppose, and what steps were taken, or would you envision taking if that wasn't the case, to keep students safe in an activity like this?
It's interesting. We, in creating this this project, we immediately just inherently developed it in that framework of developing expectations for us as a group, coming up with very structured ways to, get attention. Just we tried to make it as structured as possible, offered reinforcement as students were engaging in the activity. But to be quite honest, the students were very well behaved. I don't really know what the gang scenario is within Osceola County, but I don't think there was ever a moment where any of us were concerned for the student safety. They seemed like they felt very respected in our environment. And, so in turn, I felt like they engaged with respect as well. But I imagine you probably want to make sure that it was very, very structured in a situation where there was more risk of that kind of interaction. Yeah.
And
I
I
don't know
would
if anyone
just
else has anything else.
kind of chime in there. That's where I think in selecting students is really critical, because if yes, all of our high schools have gang activity. That is a thing. If you're very specific so that, you pick all the students from a gang, then they all know each other. So that was our whole point in picking a diverse group on campus. So I'm going to pick one student that's an athlete. I'm going to pick another student that maybe is from the drama club. I'll pick another student that maybe is more of like the robotics, another student that isn't in any clubs. Maybe a student that I know that's kind of a frequent flyer in the office, but doesn't have any, serious offenses, but they just have a hard time. And then, so you're picking students that really don't know each other. So if they're all coming together, and then like we did some very specific things to try to help them get to know each other and make it feel like a safe space. And the fact that it was a small group, I think that helped too. So we didn't have 30 students from one school, which would be like 100 students altogether. That would be a lot and overwhelming. I mean, granted, I know that's not a big picture of what's happening at the school, but our vision is that those 10 students will go back and talk to other students to get other input. So hopefully we would avoid those cliques or gangs that you might have.
Sherry, that was 10 students from each school. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yes.
thanks.
I just going to say to piggyback off of what Betsy was saying about expectations. We told the students up front a couple things, and two of them really stood out here. One, we told them that, we want them to participate, but if there's something they're uncomfortable with, it's okay to pass. It's okay not to participate and just sit and listen. So they had that opportunity if there's something that they were uncomfortable with, where they could do that. The other thing we told them up front is we are here to hear and listen from you. Your adult from your school is here to listen with you. And so what we told them was, because we're here to listen from you, we want to hear what you really think. We don't want you to tell us what you think the adults want to hear. And we kind of reiterated that a couple of times. It's about, we want to hear from you, your true thoughts, and we want you to feel comfortable saying it. It's a safe space. And let me tell you, the kids got that. Like, all we had to do that was say that once or twice. And there was no like, okay, I'm apologizing for saying this. No, say how you feel. The only thing we asked was not to say specific adults' names on campus, but things like a teacher, an administrator, a support staff, something like that. And I think that they really were like, oh, okay. And then the last part is we did have their adult from the school who had a relationship with the students already as that additional support to help keep students safe.
I'm sorry, there was a question early on from Karen. Stephanie, when you were talking about using those QR codes, and her question was, and no data question is nerdy, by the way, Karen, but what percentage of students responded to the QR code? What percentage of the building population?
I don't know what the percent was. The students said they were very happy with the responses, that they got more than if it was just them giving the answers. That was just reported back to us. They didn't say specifically what percentage they got. That would have been a great data point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Danny is offering some prevention tips along the lines of student safety. He's recommending select a neutral public building to meet, prepare students of who they may see, get agreement of respect, option to leave if uncomfortable, school provides transportation to and back. So those are great recommendations. Danny, thank you for sharing those. Are there other questions? Oh, sorry.
I was gonna say, any other questions, Patty?
I think we've covered all that I was able to follow. And FYI, if you didn't see that, Kent McIntosh posted the link to that survey and confirmed that, number one, it's validated, but it is actually the Georgia School Climate Survey Suite, I believe.
Awesome.
So
thank you for doing that.
yeah, the resources in there for you.
That's awesome. Thank you, Kent. Well, as we're wrapping up, I know it kicks us out, I think exactly. Am I right? The right time, or do we have a few more minutes left?
Well, say goodbye just in case.
I just know on a different time zone, and I get the whole time zone throws me for a loop all the time. So if there's other questions, we can continue to answer them. I just wanted to make sure that we got this up there. I know that the forum really does like your feedback. It is anonymous, and they do, I think, sometimes do little raffles with them to people to enter something. And I won once, which was so cool, but I didn't need to win. But it was pretty cool to be able just to say, yes, I know they do win, I won. So really, if you could do that as we're wrapping up, I think we have a couple more minutes.
It's like the raffle link, someone's reporting that it didn't work. Could somebody mind responding in the chat if you were able to make it work, and we'll see if it was a single issue or. And Dominique, there are multiple ways to get to that. You can go back to Pathable and there's a link there. So there are multiple ways to finish that evaluation. And great feedback to the team who presented. People are really appreciative of the kind of real world examples you shared.
And just to let you know, if you haven't noticed in Pathables yet, we do have the PowerPoint presentation in there to give you some more visuals or reminders of what we talked about. It also will have our email addresses and contact information. So if you have some follow-up questions that we could answer, again, we just have had the opportunity to just do one of the 4 sessions. So I'm sure we will continue to learn more throughout this school year as we continue to work with the schools and the students, and really interested to see what the school leadership teams actually end up adopting for the students and implementing.
Yes, and people are in agreement how important student voice is. So I will shamelessly plug, attending some of the sessions on Thursday that are specific to student voice. So, and Marcus Jackson's on, and we opened this presentation with his quote. So I just want to shout that out to him.
Ooh, nice.
Most people are wrapping up. Here is our contact information. So you'll see myself, Stephanie on there, Betsy, Sherry, and Patty. If we don't have any other questions, or we have any more other questions, we can definitely answer those.
I don't see any coming up.
Okay.
Thank you all so much for your help today, Michelle and Patty. It's so great to get to meet you. And thank you to Stephanie and Sherry. My nose is running.
Me. Thanks for being partners in crime with me.
Anytime.
Leave this up here for a little bit longer in case someone wants to take a picture of it. That is, though, in the Pathables as well.
Go ahead and stop the recording at this point.
Okay, thank you, Michelle.